Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest at the Legions of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the Starcast Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 99 and we're covering Orientalum Ecclesiatum 7 through 11. And this is on the Patriarchs of the Eastern Churches. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican or frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday we spoke about Eastern rites, part of the universal heritage. We should foster and preserve them. Today we're going to talk about what is a patriarch in the Eastern Church and what authority they have, right? So this is covering all the section Eastern Rite patriarchs. Today, 2 or 3 of the numbers had a number of subparagraphs, but they were each like one-sentence paragraphs. So I'm not going to mention when there are subparagraphs. I'll just read them as if they were all one paragraph. I know I usually note that, so I thought I'd note that I did. I'm not noting it. Anyways, let's get to paragraph 7 on what is a patriarch historically, right? So this is kind of where we start. We start with the history and like where did this idea come from? And what's the distinction between the patriarch versus the pope versus the bishop, etc. So let's read it. The patriarchate as an institution has existed in the church from the earliest times and was recognized by the first ecumenical councils. By the name Eastern Patriarch is meant a bishop who belongs jurisdiction over all bishops, not excepting metropolitans, clergy, and people of his own territory right, in accordance with canon law without prejudice to the primacy of the Roman pontiff. Wherever a hierarchy of any right is appointed outside the territorial bounds of the patriarchate, he remains attached to the hierarchy of the patriarchate of that right in accordance with canon law. Right, so here we have it, right? It goes back to this earliest time. It goes back. The first idea of the patriarchs came from the idea that there were apostolic sees. There are sees where one of the 12 apostles was the bishop of that see. And so those sees, like Ephesus, Jerusalem, Rome, etc., were given a certain priority early in the church, right? And that was a certain elevation that like, oh, you're not just the successor of, the apostles in general, Peter or Thomas or one of the or Andrew or James was the bishop there in the past. It got a little spread out after that. Places like Constantinople, which became the head of the Roman Empire, or the head of all of it, or just the east of it, at different times. Constantinople is modern day Istanbul. Just Constantinople, Byzantium, Istanbul, same place. Turkey right there between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. Anyway, so this is an idea that goes back, and then they were accepted at all these first ecumenical councils, right? So you have things like, Nicaea in 325. Constantinople itself is 381, the second ecumenical council, things like that. And these patriarchs are mentioned in the disciplinary norms of these councils. This patriarch is the bishop over all the bishops of that right? So even over archbishops, and in the East, they often call them eparchs or archeparchs. It just means the same as bishop. It's just a different root that they use rather than bishop. And this is both geographically and for that right around the world. So obviously all the bishops in Ukrainian Catholic right. But then also, for example, there's Ukrainian Catholic bishops in Canada. And those bishops are Ukrainian Catholic and they're under the, we'll get to it in a minute, the major archbishop of the Ukrainians, which is similar to a patriarch, but we'll get to that in a few numbers. Should have given an example other than the Ukrainians. Anyway, so I think that's number 10. It talks about that, but we'll get to that in a minute. So paragraph 8 is talking about no hierarchy among the patriarchs, right? So though some of the patriarchates of the Eastern churches are of earlier and some of later date, nonetheless, all are equal in respect to patriarchal dignity, without, however, prejudice to legitimately established precedents of honor. So this is just say, hey, they're all equal under the Pope. They're all like right up there, above archbishops and things like that, but below the Pope in the chain of hierarchy, and they're all equal. But it does mention this kind of precedence of honor can be established. These are things like, for example, if a bunch of patriarchs are celebrating with the Pope or, meeting with the Pope, there's a certain order, which they are supposed to process in a liturgical procession or sit in a meeting and things like that. And those are to be preserved, but those are matters of honorifics, not matters of actual power and authority. And this idea, paragraph 9 is going to talk again about this ancient thing and about the authority that the patriarch has over other bishops, which is really what's unique about a patriarch versus other bishops. Because even in our Western church, we have archbishops, And the archbishop has, in minor things, authority over the bishops of his what's called an ecclesiastical province. But it's very minor things he has authority over them. And the vast majority of the bishop has authority directly under the Pope. And so an ecclesiastical province is wherever you have an archbishop, every other archdiocese, every other diocese is under that archbishop in an ecclesiastical province. There's certain things about organizing, certain things about as far as, which bishop is this or that. Often in the U.S., ecclesiastical provinces match states or several states. The odd time there are multiple in a state. Texas has 2. California has San Francisco and L.A. as separate. But then Hawaii is just under San Francisco. Or is it under LA? I think it's under San Francisco, right? And then other ones, they're combined, right? So the Archdiocese of Hartford has Connecticut and Rhode Island, right? Those 2 states, because Rhode Island only has 1 diocese. And things like that. And so that's the idea. And they have a certain authority, but it's very minor, whereas these patriarchs have a much more general authority over the bishops in their right. But let's read about how their authority is and how that is ancient. So let's go. By the most ancient tradition of the church, the patriarchs of the Eastern churches are to be accorded special honor, seeing that each is set over his patriarchate as father and head. This sacred council therefore determines that their rights and privileges should be reestablished in accordance with the ancient tradition of each of the churches and the decrees of the ecumenical councils. Rights and privileges in question are those obtained in the time of union between East and West, though they should be adopted somewhat to modern conditions. The patriarchs, with their synods, are the highest authority for all businesses in the patriarchate, including the right of establishing new eparchies and nominating bishops of their right within their territorial bounds of the patriarchate, without prejudice the inalienable right of the Roman pontiff to intervene in individual cases. Right, so this is what it's talking about. It's this ancient idea that they would be in charge of their whole right, and this is special honors reestablished, and it's re-emphasizing that it's not because, like, for example, we're talking about the naming of bishops at the starting of dioceses. In the Roman Rite, that depends directly on the Pope, and at certain times in this Latinizing influence, the Pope has tried to influence into these other rites, but really it should be the Patriarch, is what it's saying, and we are giving it back to the patriarchs. Here they're talking about union of East and West. So right in 1054, there was a schism between the Orthodox and the Catholics, mainly over if the Pope is the first among equals or the first over the other patriarchs. Just an honorific first or a real first in that sense. There are other debates like about the filioque, but the filioque was really more of a linguistic issue or anything else. Maybe we'll go into that in the other document on ecumenism. But anyway, so right, and they have that full authority, and the Pope still has the authority to intervene in individual cases. For example, if a patriarch is promoting a bishop who has very big problems, and the Pope's like, no, we need to not use that, give that bishop that authority because she's got problems or something like that. But it would be very rare, and in general, the Pope would leave it to the patriarch. So paragraph 10 talks about these major archbishops. And they are really the same as patriarchs in all but title and honor. So let's read it. What has been said about patriarchs is also valid in harmony with canon law in respect to major archbishops who rule the whole or of some individual church or rite. So yeah, this is the same idea, right? So in rites that don't have a patriarch, the leader of that rite is called a major archbishop, and it's different from just a normal archbishop because he's above all the other archbishops of the rite. For example, for example, Ukrainian Catholic Rite, there is an archbishop in Canada of Ukrainian Catholics because there's a lot of Ukrainian Catholics in Canada. I don't know how many others there are around the world, but I know in Canada, in Winnipeg, there's the Ukrainian Catholic Archeparchy of Winnipeg. Winnipeg is north of Minnesota if you're trying to do your Canadian geography. But anyway, so he's under the major archbishop there, and the major archbishop can nominate him without referring back to the Pope, which is a very, very significant, bigger thing than, say, the Archbishop of San Francisco here can do with the Diocese of San Jose. If our bishop was to pass away, Archbishop of San Francisco can't just name a new bishop for San Jose. He needs to check with the Pope, right? And for example, the Maronites in Lebanon and the Chaldeans in Iraq have a patriarch, but the Ukrainians and the Syro-Malabar, the Syro-Malabar of southern India, they have major archbishops. It's more of an honor. It's really, like I said, it doesn't really have much of a practical canonical effect. Doesn't really change much beyond the honor. And paragraph 11 is about establishing new patriarchates, which I think is mainly about ecumenism. If any large group of Orthodox came back into the fold, rejoined the Catholic Church, reunited with us and things. So let's read it. Saying that the patriarchal office in the Eastern Church is a traditional form of government, the Sacred Ecumenical Council ardently desires that the new patriarchates should be erected where there is need, to be established either by an ecumenical council or by a Roman pontiff, right? So they can be established. They need a council or the Pope. And like I said, I think realistically what it would be is, let's say, like the Serbian Orthodox Church decided, hey, we're working together. We want to be reunited, work on reunion with the Pope. And, our leader is called the Patriarch in the Eastern Church or something. I'm not actually sure I think the head of the Serbian Orthodox Church is. If not, let's say the Greek Orthodox Church or something. And, well, we'll elevate the leader of that new, that new one also to Patriarch. And I think that's where it would be practically applied. So, thank you for listening to this episode in Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast. You can donate to help StarQuest produce it and other great podcasts at sqpn.com/give. You can give one time, monthly, or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we're going to continue with the next paragraphs of Orientalium Ecclesiarum, which is, I forgot to copy this in my notes, which is 12 to 14 on baptism and confirmation in the East. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information, such as playlists and a reading plan, go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X.
Amen.